All right. Good evening. My timer seems to be stuck. All right, guys. Here's something that I should have done a long time ago. Hi, Sean, and hi, Blessed. Here's something that I should have done a long time ago. When I ended my Saturn through the Houses series, I should have ended it with a general description of Saturn, right? A general talk of Saturn. But I specifically wanted to speak of my favorite names of Saturn. Saturn has 108 names that you can find online, but I specifically wanted to talk about some of my most favorite. I hope you guys can hear me. I hope you guys can see me. Well, not see me, but in any case. I guess there are only two people here right now. But alright, let's get started anyway. I actually had this on my Patreon, but then I decided, you know what? I want to have this on YouTube. So, 108 Names of Lord Saturn, a commentary by yours truly. Okay, so one of Saturn's name is the Beautiful One. Let's read what I have written here. This is one of my personal favorite names. Saturn is actually traditionally the planet of ugliness. It is the planet that lacks brilliance. It is dull. It is lacking in luster. When Saturn is sitting in a house, like the second house for example, it can influence the native to perceive that house as so repulsive that it wishes to never engage with those significations. But as a planet related to constant refinements, it slowly, over time, removes every imperfection, transforming one into a thing of admirable beauty. That is, if you actively engage with Saturn, that is what happens. If you don't, which very often a lot of people don't, that place remains underdeveloped. In alchemy, when we consider the astrological glyph of Saturn, right here, it is said that it is externally corrosive, but inwardly lunar, as the glyph shows a cross on top and the moon in the bottom, suggesting that it starts off ugly and repulsive, but through effort becomes as beautiful as the moon. This is the opposite to the glyph of Venus, which the glyph of Venus is right here, showing the sun on top and a cross in the bottom, being externally solar and inwardly corrosive, telling us that it starts off beautiful in brilliance, but wanes and wanes into dullness. One finds that Saturn influenced individuals can be of two types. They can either see themselves as so repulsive that they give up on self-grooming altogether, which over time makes them even less good looking, or they can be very interested in their appearance, constantly perceiving flaws, and constantly trying to improve their look. All right, so in one live stream a long time ago, I talked about this idea in alchemy, which you can even read about in the Golden Dawn, etc., about planets, right? So, for example, Saturn has the cross on top. Up here we have the cross, and it has the moon on the bottom. And so Saturn is said to be externally corrosive or externally terrestrial, corrosive, and inwardly lunar. This is different from the glyph of Jupiter. How is the glyph of Jupiter again? Jupiter glyph. Jupiter's like this. The glyph of Jupiter is externally lunar because we have the moon on top, and inwardly corrosive because we have the cross over here. The glyph of Mars is externally corrosive because the cross is on top, and inwardly solar because the sun is on the bottom. And the glyph of Venus is externally solar and inwardly corrosive because the sun is on top and the cross is on the bottom. So because Saturn is externally corrosive, it is a planet that starts off dull, starts off unrefined, starts off scary, starts off, yes, even ugly. But through refinement, it reveals its lunar side, right? So that's one of the various interpretations of it. Something else that I like about, oh, look, there's a lot more people here. Hello, hello, hello. I'll be right there. Something else that I like about calling Saturn the Beautiful One is this. Saturn is a planet of all things that we reject within ourselves. It is a planet of darkness, the planet of shadows. It's also a planet of ignorance, you know what I mean? But Saturn is also a planet that can lead to a lot of inner beauty, because when you confront all of the internal ugliness within you that you reject, that you're too afraid to, yes, you're too afraid to confront, over time it transforms into beauty. And actually, I'm not sure if I want you guys to guess. I'm not sure if I want to tell you guys. But for you guys that are in this live stream, I'm either going to end up blurring it out, or you guys are going to end up figuring out what nakshatra is going to be, what is the next nakshatra that I'm going to talk about. Yeah. This video right here, what is this video all about? Unfortunately, most people that were not giving the right name. I think only like 2 people gave got it right. Most people were just off the mark. Hello, Moon Cloud, Nena, Venus in Pisces. You would like to see me? Oh, that's too bad. You're not going to be able to see me. Hello, name I cannot pronounce, but this is a corgi. As a drawer, I'm a good astrologer. So in any case, I'm a horrible astrologer. Ding, 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 ding. Yes. The next video is going to be about Pushya Nakshatra. The next video is going to be about Pushya. All right, let us move on. So one of my favorite names of Saturn is Sundaraya, which means the beautiful one, which goes in contrast to its traditional names. Okay, here's another one of my favorite names of Saturn. The one whose feats purifies mortals. So, delusion, particularly in more mystical fields, is the most common roadblock to progress. The 12th house is the house of both intuition and delusion. To plateau in a discipline or a field is also much more common than to experience excellence, because one becomes complacent or one becomes disinterested in constant self-perfection. Saturn is a planet of science because it is the planet of experimentation, as it is the planet of experience, trial and error, actually understanding how something operates tangibly. It is often said by astrologers that to achieve success in a particular house, look to its karaka, its significator. In the case of the 12th house, to rescue oneself from delusion and to constantly make progress, worship the planet related to being grounded and constant advancement, defeat. So yeah, this is one thing that tends to happen a lot in the astrological field, the mystical field. Very often you'll find that some people who are naturally very intuitive, they also are a little bit inclined towards delusion. And they don't really have a very good, how do I put this? They're not very good at really filtering out, okay, what is intuition, what is delusion, you know what I mean? And so if you want to find success in 12th house matters, you have to be very Saturnian. You have to be very critical of yourself. You have to be willing to really test out every single intuitive message that you receive. You have to try your best to be as practical as possible with these intuitive things. You know what I mean? If you do a reading, for example, if you're interested in astrology and you're constantly doing readings and studying in charts, you have to track yourself so you can know which ones of your predictions are right, which ones are wrong, and not allow yourself to be led by ego or a delusion. Because, yeah. Here's another one of my favorite names, the one who injures. Saturn's gaze is said to be looking downwards, which can either mean the native themselves are humble or that the natives literally look down upon others. With an eye for imperfection, Saturn inspects you for flaws and is all too generous with its critiques and commentaries. It also tends to hate weakness, physical, moral, and any other expression. And through its various plagues and afflictions, it seeks to destroy either the weakness within an individual or the individual themselves. All right, so this is something else that's very, very interesting about Saturn. Saturn is constantly trying to refine you. And that does not always feel very, very comfortable. Saturn and Saturnians, particularly Saturnian nakshatras, they tend to be very critical of themselves and very critical of other people as well. And something else about Saturn is that sometimes people have a difficult time really seeing themselves and really seeing their own flaws. Here's a quality of Saturn that we'll also explore in future videos. Saturnians, Saturn nakshatras, they are very good at orchestrating situations to force you to confront yourself to the reality of your own weaknesses. You know what I mean? Like, let's say you have a flaw. I don't even know what example to use. Let us say that you're a very prideful person and you don't realize that you're a prideful person. And the Saturnian is trying to tell you to your face that you're prideful, but you still don't see it. Then what the Saturnian will do is they will orchestrate a situation that helps you reveal your own pride to yourself, helps you realize your own pride. You know what I mean? But all these things are painful. To be criticized is painful. To be revealed, to have yourself realize your own imperfections is also painful. You know, no other planet causes pain quite as much as Saturn, because it really forces you to confront yourself to your own dark side, to your own ugliness, your own weaknesses. So yes, he is the one who injures. All right, let me go check the chat before I continue. Will you ever be getting a face reveal? Honestly, I don't think so. And I don't even know why you guys would even care. This is an astrology channel, not a face reveal channel. Sometimes you don't know what is delusion or what is intuition. Yes, many people are like that. Thank you for loving my content, Huda. Yes, these are beautiful names. Gordon Ramsay is a Mrigashira, Uttara Palguni, Vishaka. I don't know where his Saturn is in. He's very dramatic, that is true. Thank you, Blessed. Actually, my readings are open. So I first started with what I'm trying to do right now, how I'm opening like my reading seasons. I want to open with mini readings first. So the mini readings are not closed. Then I opened up this new service, which is like, you can ask me questions, right? So you pay $10 for the first question and then $5 for every additional question, asking me anything you want about your chart. So that's something else that I've opened. And then now, I'm not sure if I'm going to close that or not, but now I'm opening my full readings. So the mini reading seasons is over. I've opened the full readings. The mini readings were like $50. The full readings are now $150. So yeah, readings open. If anybody who's interested, please email me. I think you guys know my email. So yeah. All right. Another one of my favorite names is the one who has the form of the sacred precepts. Saturn keeps one's head down and is less interested in questioning one's own authority figures. Instead, humbly trusting that said authorities may understand much more than one. It seeks instead to discover whatever wisdom they may possess by actually following their commands, instead of arguing against them from a place of ignorance. It is not that Saturn does not have the ability to go against, it does, but first it humbly trusts that all people have wisdom to impart. And so Saturn silences the rebellious voice of its own intellect, goes along with the instructions given to it, and in this way discovers their merit. All right, so Saturn is traditionally the planet of ignorance, right? It is not really the planet of intelligence. There's something about intelligence that can be quite rebellious, very intelligent people who take a lot of pride in their intelligence. They feel this urge, this pressure to contradict others, to argue against others. Saturn, that is traditionally the planet of ignorance, it's not really interested in arguing with people. It's not really interested in being intellectual, Instead, it has this more humble attitude where it just assumes that other people might understand something about a situation that it doesn't. And Saturn's way of understanding somebody else's statements is not by arguing against them. It's not by theorizing. It's not by being abstract, because Saturn is the least abstract planet. It's instead to trying to apply those things, Yeah. Moving on. The intellect is very deceptive. How often do teenagers, to use a common demographic that believes themselves to be all knowing without having truly lived life, argue, contradict, and rebel against instruction on the basis of their limited understanding of reality? The stumbling block of the highly intelligent is to believe that they can demystify the universe without actually living first, resisting the voices of those who have observably achieved more in the real world than they have. The voice of the highly intelligent is too loud, and their minds are such that they can only accommodate the echoes of their own reason. Saturn, the traditionally mentally lame planet, understands this, and so it quiets down its own intellect and listens. How curious that in the book of Proverbs, to listen is related to wisdom, but pride and folly are also kin. Actually, Saturnian individuals tend to be a favorite of teachers, parents, and authority figures owing to this obedience, this humility. Powerful people tend to willingly pour onto the Saturnian individual all of their knowledge because they believe themselves to be in the presence of someone less interested in contradicting them at every turn, but instead willing to consider the validity of their teachings and truly apply them. This is particularly a dynamic one finds with Pusha Nakshatra. One might ask, but what about Jupiter? Jupiter indeed has an incredible capacity to absorb teachings from everyone, but Jupiter is not fundamentally loyal to a perspective or a teacher. One thing that you're going to find with Jupiter when Jupiter is well placed, a well placed Jupiter is not religious. A well placed Jupiter does not submit itself to any philosophy, to any teacher. It simply wants to absorb from everyone, and oftentimes it arrives at its own personal ideas. Very often when Jupiter is badly placed, that's when you tend to find people who are a little bit more dogmatic, people who are a little bit more stuck in their ways, people who, yeah, those sort of people. Where were we? In fact, here I am reading this part. In fact, Jupiter tends to end up rebellious owing to how much it has learned and absorbed, that it has gone beyond the influence of any single perspective. Yes, that's the other thing. Jupiter over time can arrive at a place where it can still learn from other people, but yes, it's not interested in submitting to anyone. A very well placed Jupiter, yeah, it tends to be just a little bit rebellious because it can arrive at a place where it feels as though it understands so much that it starts to contradict others. It starts to go against others to some degree. And not only that, when Jupiter is very, very well placed, because it understands so much and it studies so much and reads outside of its current religion, outside of its current culture, it gets to the point where a very well placed Jupiter will literally go against the priests and the philosophers and the teachers that it grew up with, introducing them, forcing them to excuse me, introducing those teachers to new perspectives and forcing new perspectives on those teachers, completely destroying ideologies. A very well placed Jupiter will destroy ideologies because ideologies tend to have a portion of the truth, but they tend to reject all other aspects of the truth. So that's something that you'll find with a very well placed Jupiter. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. Where is Saturn transiting right now? Saturn currently is in Uttara Bhadrapada, isn't it? Yes, so those of us who are turning 30, we are experiencing our Saturn return. Here's another one of my favorite names, the bestower of non-attachment. Saturn is the karaka of transformation. To transform is to change, to be willing to let go of an aspect of oneself in order to accommodate or gain a new aspect. If one suffers from attachment to an aspect of the self, whether good or bad, to let go of that aspect is impossible. In order to improve, one must be willing to let go. If one is attached to the idea of being intelligent, one will be very resistant to being contextualized as ignorance. As such, a one would be unwilling to learn new things. As such, one would be unwilling to learn new things. If one is overly attached to the idea of being a good person, one may be too unwilling to recognize the many ways in which one is actually evil. As a result, evil continues to foster in the soul. Saturn tends to receive insults and compliments the same way, with complete indifference, becoming neither attached to the idea of being smart or dumb, pretty or ugly, better or worse. And this non-attachment facilitates constant self-improvement and maintains their willingness to always look at themselves honestly. Since they are never attached to an idea of themselves, they are never afraid to consider their various aspects. Another thing about this non-attachment thing is pride. We can define pride in many ways, but pride is also an attachment to an idea of yourself. And because you are attached to the idea of yourself, you're unwilling to let go of that idea. One of the things that defines a humble person is being non-attached. A humble person, other people may call them handsome, but he's going to be like, okay. He's indifferent to it. Other people can call him ugly and he'll be like, okay, he's indifferent to it. Other people can call him intelligent. Other people can call him dumb. He'll be like, okay, because his humility, one of the qualities of humility is non-attachment. Saturn is a planet of humility, and so there's that. And so there is that. The one who bears a quiver of 100 arrows. In truth, where we have Saturn tends to remain underdeveloped for many years. Some even go to the grave having never truly developed that area because it is an area that intimidates them. So, to go on a tangent a little bit, many people have this idea that when you have Saturn in a certain placement, oh, it will always get better with time. That's not true. It can actually get worse with time. Because the thing about Saturn is that its significations are so intimidating that the average person prefers to never interact with those significations. Let us say you have Saturn in the fourth house, for example. It could suggest many things. It could suggest that you're a person with reduced empathy. It could suggest you're a person who has some traumas from your past. It could suggest somebody who, the fourth house has a lot to do with self-reflection, and the fourth house has a lot to do with contemplating your own soul, you know what I mean? And contemplating your own emotions. And so when you have Saturn there, you're not somebody who's interested in contemplating themselves. You're not somebody who's interested in contemplating your own ethics, your own morality, you know what I mean? And as a result of having Saturn in the fourth, over time, your fourth house will literally get worse. You know, because you're intimidated by the elements of Saturn in the fourth house. So you never interact with those elements. But then if you force yourself to interact with those elements, if you are brave and you confront yourself to those elements, then Saturn in the fourth house will get better and better and better and better over time. Let us say you have Saturn in the second house. Maybe you feel insecure about your level of education. Maybe you feel insecure about your level of knowledge. Maybe you feel insecure about your appearance. And because of that, maybe you feel insecure about your appearance and you don't find yourself very attractive. And because of that, you literally never look in the mirror. But here's a problem. If you never look in the mirror, if you never take the steps to educate yourself, you're not going to get smarter. You're going to get dumber. You're not going to get more handsome, more pretty. You're going to get even uglier. So eventually you have to confront yourself to the significations of where Saturn is placed, because those things are not going to get better with time. They're not. They're going to get worse. Saturn, wherever Saturn sits, it can only get better if you are brave and if you confront yourself to those significations. You know what I mean? It will intimidate you. It will be scary, but that's just what you have to do. Let us say you have Saturn in Barney, for example. Barney has a lot to do with the feminine raw sexual energy, with feminine hunger, feminine sexual hunger, the raw nature of women. If you're a man and you have Saturn in Barney, it could suggest that women scare you. Women scare you, women intimidate you, and because of that, you go so much of your life without ever getting any real experience with women. If you have Saturn in Barney as a man, you're ignorant to the nature of women. You know what I mean? And because you're ignorant to the nature of women, that is another quality, another factor that intimidates you, and then you go even longer without learning about women. Let us say you are a woman and you have Saturn and Barney, then you probably have a difficult relationship to your own body, you have a difficult relationship to your own sexuality, you have a difficult relationship to your own desires. You probably are a woman who rejects her own femininity, and just femininity in general is just a very uncomfortable and difficult topic for you as a woman, you know. But the thing is that if you don't confront yourself to those realities today, they're not going to get better, they're going to get worse. And so wherever Saturn sits, those things scare you, they intimidate you, you're ignorant about those things even oppress you, because another thing about Saturn, where it's placed, it also signifies people who oppress you, people who bully you, people who put you down. So like if you have Saturn in Barney, for example, other women oppress you. Other women, shit, I'm not speaking very well. Other women make you feel bad about yourself. Other women make you feel less than, you know what I mean? Yeah, and so things like that. You have to confront yourself to the reality of your Saturn. How can one be non-attached without becoming apathetic? That is a very good question, and I'm not sure if I have the answer to that. You're a pride person. You're a proud person. Hello, personified universe. You know someone who's handsome but does not like to look at himself in the mirror. Okay. Where does he have Saturn? In the first and the second? Maybe. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. Where were we? Yes, the Saturn intimidates us. We fear being humiliated by the forces of Saturn. We doubt our ability to overwhelm the forces of Saturn, and as a result, we allow ourselves to be oppressed by those forces, or we run so far away from them, we believe they no longer affect us. Saturn is scary, and to approach it, the house it rules over, its sign and nakshatra, sends shivers down the spine. But the brave go forth, starting off totally ignorant, dominated, and humiliated day in and day out by the significations of their Saturn placements. One arrow misses the mark, another arrow misses the mark, but the brave continue, suffering the insults, the torments, trying again and again and again. And every time they think they are making progress, they are embarrassed to find themselves still a beginner. But slowly, through time and a lot of efforts, they hit the bullseye. So yeah, that is something that Saturn does. All right, here's another one of my favorite names of Saturn. The one whose mount is a vulture. Saturn's greatest strength is its ability to endure. It may not overwhelm others physically as does Mars, but it is energetically economical. It's not a yeller, it's not a trash talker, it's no bull. Instead, it preserves itself, remaining in the fight against its much larger, more seemingly powerful adversaries, allowing them to spend themselves and their strength, as arrogance is often not far from those who see themselves as powerful. Is arrogance not a stumbling block? Damn, let me reread this because I know that I confuse a lot of you. Instead, it preserves itself, remaining in the fight against its much larger, more seemingly powerful adversaries, allowing them to spend themselves and their strength, as arrogance is often not far from those who see themselves as powerful. And is arrogance not a stumbling block? In the end, to Saturn the spoils, as it eats even the bodies of its enemies. This name also points to Saturn's wisdom, its ability to learn from those who have come before it. Instead of reinventing the wheel, it absorbs the life experiences of others, such that it needs not make the same mistakes. The vulture here is seen as an animal that watches from afar how life turns to death, then turns to life again. By consuming the meat of those who have passed, one is absorbing their life and its experiences. Absorbing their life and their experiences. Ketu actually is also said to have the vulture as a mouth. Okay, that's very, 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 very interesting. Your friend has Jupiter and Ketu in the 12th. He rejects the mystical, but apparently is also very scarily accurate. That's very interesting. Very, very interesting. And yeah, it checks out as well. If you have Saturn in Ashwini who oppresses you, it could be the fact that people who have powerful identities oppress you. Like the most popular kid at school may oppress you. Your older sibling may oppress you. People who have more developed identities. If you have Saturn in Ashwini, what it could suggest is that in your life, especially in your early life, you were denied the opportunity to develop your own identity. Like anytime you were trying to become anytime you were trying to become great, anytime you were trying to do something to define yourself, to say, this is me, you know what I mean? People denied you that opportunity. Some way, somehow, people deny that. They would shame you, they would humiliate you, they would not want you to develop into your own individual person. And so you remained weak for a very, very long time, unless you were very, very brave, very, very strong, and you really confronted them. If you have Saturn in Ashwini, depending on the houses that Saturn rules, those people force an identity onto you. Those people force an identity onto you. Something else that Saturn and Ashwini could suggest, but of course you have to look at the rest of the chart, is that you were forced to be subservient to people. You have Saturn in the 12th. You just have to keep pushing. You just have to keep pushing if you want to become a more intuitive person. That's it. It's going to take longer for you than it does for others. But once you do, your predictions and everything that you see and your visions are going to be much more accurate than those of other people. The 12th house is also a house of sights because it is the house of the left eye, whereas the second house is the right eye. The second house is perception into the physical material. The 12th house is perception into the invisible. So if you really train your Saturn in the 12th house, you can develop an ability to see into the invisible. Saturn's aspect to other houses and planets work the same, but in a more weakened way. If you have Saturn in Revati, depending on other placements, what it could suggest is that one of Revati's qualities is being a very, very good chameleon. Revatis are the most natural actors. They are the most natural actors. So if you have Saturn in Revati, you might have a difficult time changing your form. Something else about Revati is that Revati is very, very persuasive and very, very charming and very romantic. If you have Saturn in Revati, it could suggest that you're not necessarily very romantic. You're not very persuasive. You're not very charming. You don't have many of those more artistic, more seductive, more chameleon-like qualities because it negates those qualities. But if you actively work on those qualities and you turn them into a science, you can, yeah. Okay, you have Saturn in Ashwini too. All right. Yeah, if you have Saturn in the 10th house, depending on the placement. Oh, and it's also conjunct Rahu. It would make sense. Saturn would overall give you a fear of those significations. Rahu would give you an anxiety, but a fascination for those significations. Oh, you're the one who said Saturn in Ashwini, fashionaholic. I'm very sorry to hear that. If you have Saturn in Swati, that's a very, very good placement because, of course, Saturn is exalted in Libra, right? Swati's worst qualities is being random, not knowing how to focus. Saturn comes to limit those qualities of Swati. And so all of a sudden you become very capable of focusing and to build yourself. What else about Swati? Let me think about a few other qualities of Swati. Let me see if I can quickly think of a few Swati qualities. No, can't think of anything right now. What about Uttara Bhadra? If you have Saturn in Uttara Bhadra, it could suggest that you have a very difficult time with mystical subjects. You have a very difficult. You're not as naturally intuitive as other people. You have a difficult time with fasting, meditation, and things like that. Saturn being a planet that oppresses you, it can suggest that spirits and invisible entities easily oppress you. When you were younger, you probably suffered from horrible nightmares, for example, because you're yes, since you're so ignorant of the significations of intuition and other qualities that Uttarapada represent, you're easily oppressed by those things. Because anytime you're ignorant and weak in an area, you're susceptible to being controlled by the forces that control that area. Yeah, what else about Uttarapada right off the top of my head? Okay, if I think of more things, I'll say something. Oh, you relate to those Saturn Barney things. Okay. Okay. If you also have Sun and Venus in the Revati, in that case, the things that I said are not going to apply as much, and instead you're going to make a science out of those things, and you could actually end up a more sophisticated Revati than most other Revatis. Saturn in Kritika, if it's in the side of Taurus, it is well placed, and so it's not going to be as bad. One of Kritika's worst qualities is thinking that it is objective. Kritikas really like to think of themselves as very objective, very logical, as if they were perceiving situations very, very clearly. When you have Saturn in Kritika, it helps you understand that reality is much more subjective, and you become much more interested in really understanding the way that other people perceive things. Because Kritikas, at their worst, are like, this is the way it is, nobody else's opinion matters. Everything else that everybody else is saying comes from a place of emotion and bias, but a Kritika person can be ignorant of their own bias because they can think of themselves as so very objective. And so, yeah. Yeah. But generally speaking, Saturn in Kritika, unless it's in Aries, is quite well placed. And so you shouldn't be experiencing too much negativity. And you also should not be experiencing too much oppression that you cannot get over on your own. All right, let's move on. Here's another one of my favorite names of Saturn, the hidden one. Saturn is a conspirator. As the least bright planet, its strength is in the shadows. It seeks to overwhelm others with secret agendas and hidden plots, keeping its head down, keeping quiet, and developing its schemes in the dead of night. No one ever sees Saturn coming. Here's another one of my favorite names of Saturn, the Lord of Successive Misfortune. With this, I would like to connect to another of Saturn's names, which means the purifier. Saturn operates also as a winnowing basket, much like how one of the goddesses connected to it, Lakshmi, also carries a winnowing basket. Why does Saturn purposely assault us with so much misfortune? The logic is simple. If you are truly a diamond in the rough, then Saturn shall refine you, cut you, crush you to reveal that gem. But if you are weak and corrupt through and through, then Saturn will still mercilessly cut you and crush you. And if you are reduced to dust, it won't feel bad for having destroyed you anyway, for you are not meant to be. All right, so this is one of Saturn's more cruel expressions. Saturn as a planet is interested in... It wants to destroy that which is impure and to reveal that which is good. And Saturn's way of doing that is by making your life a living hell. Saturn will purposely put challenges before you, and if you break, if you get angry, if you start cursing God, if you become a mean person, if you become a hateful person. See, here's Saturn's logic. Saturn's logic is this. If all it takes is a bad day for you to reveal, if all it takes is a series of bad things happening to you for you to become an arrogant or mean person or nasty person, Saturn's logic is, well, You were always a bad person. You were always a nasty person. It just so happens that I, Saturn, through my successive misfortunes, I have revealed what you always were. See, when life is pleasant, when you get everything that you want, it is easier for you to become a good person. Even though that's not the case for 100% of people, there are some people that literally they have everything in their they have everything they could ever possibly want, and they're still evil people. But in any case, for a lot of people, when they have the things that they want, they tend to be more good, right? They tend to behave more good, but not because they're good deep down. Saturn operates a little bit like Satan. For those of you who come from a more Christian background, do you remember the story of Job? So who was Job? Job was listen, he was the most pious person. He was kind, he was loving, he was God-fearing, he was like God's favorite, okay? I'm simplifying it, it's not perfectly like that, but just go with me. And because he was God's favorite, his life was so blessed. But then one day, Satan went to God and was like, you think that guy Job loves you? You think that guy Job worships you? The only reason why he worships you, the only reason why he loves you is because you keep on blessing his life. Allow me, Satan, to make his life a living hell. And if he still loves you, God, then maybe he is a good person after all. So what does Satan proceed to do? God allowed Satan to make Job's life a living hell. But Job still continued loving God and being God-fearing. And after Satan's misfortunes, God told Satan to basically shoo away, and then God blessed Job with 10 times more the blessings that he had before. And so Saturn operates like that. Saturn wants to reveal you and to reveal who you truly are. You know, are you a good person? Are you an arrogant person? Are you a kind person? Are you humble? Are you lustful? Saturn will purposely, make your life very, very difficult. And if you truly are a diamond in the rough, then Saturn's difficulties will only reveal how perfect you truly are. And if you're an evil person through and through, then Saturn's difficulties will also reveal that. One way or the other, Saturn does not feel bad. If you're destroyed by his trials, he doesn't care. He doesn't feel bad. If you are destroyed, then you were always weak and you were always meant to be destroyed anyway. You know, and so that is Saturn's attitude. All right, so I've grouped these names together because they were similar. The destroyer of affliction, the remover of suffering, the remover of misfortune, the one who is free from disease. You can see that these names are quite similar. I have grouped these names together owing to their similarity. These names are interesting since we were just exploring how Saturn is, in actual fact, the planet of affliction. How is it then that the planet that also rids us of affliction? I apologize for the way that I'm reading. Basically, I'm saying, okay, how is it the case that Saturn is simultaneously the planet that afflicts us and also the planet that rids us of affliction? How does that work? When Saturn suffers in life, it takes a different approach than other people. If Saturn is unhappy, dissatisfied, poor, or suffering from any other condition, it does not blame the external world. Instead, it places the burden on its own shoulders to solve its own problems. If I am poor, I must be lazy. I must not be innovative enough. I probably don't understand my craft enough. These are the sort of things that Saturn tells itself. It often takes the approach of transforming the external by first transforming the internal. As a planet that operates in shadows, it often believes that the true root of things is within us. Saturn in its unevolved state is indeed the complainer, the whiner, but Saturn at its most mature picks up its own cross. One actually finds that Saturn is also an energy common in the law of attraction circles. Like you find a lot of people in the law of attraction circles, they have a lot of Saturn nakshatras, for example. As many of these authors and influencers teach us that which is external is a direct mirror of that which is internal. And so perfecting the invisible internal world eventually perfects the visible external worlds. All right, so these are the last group of names, but I want to read some of the comments here. Saturn in Rohini, generally speaking, it is well placed. But here's something that it may do. Okay, so we were just talking about Saturn in Kritika, right? Kritika thinking of itself as the most objective nakshatra. Saturn is one of the most, sorry, not Saturn, Rohini. Rohini is one of the most subjective nakshatras. Rohini at its worst can be so lost in its own subjective way of viewing reality that it literally loses objectivity. And so what does Saturn do when it's in Rohini? Saturn in every nakshatra, it's going to reduce, restrict, or limit the expression of those significations. And so if you have Saturn in Rohini, you become a very objective person. You become somebody who's very aware of your own susceptibility towards bias. You become very aware to your own susceptibility to being deceived by your own emotions, for example. You know, that's reminding yourself of that makes you into a very objective person. Rohini at its worst confuses its own emotions for reality, thinking, oh, just because I feel this way, that must be the way that things are in the external world. When in reality, that's not true, right? Rohinis at their worst, they can be disconnected from reality because they can, very much like Brahma, they can be lost in their own imagination, lost in their own bubble reality, lost in their own fantasies, completely disconnected. But if you have Saturn in Rohini, you have the opportunity of being a very, very objective person because you're aware of your own mind's susceptibility towards bias, your own mind's susceptibility to mistaking its own way of perceiving as the reality, the truth of things, etc., etc. You have Sun and Saturn in Ardra. All right, so that's a mix of significations. Let's try to separate them a little bit. If you have Saturn in Ardra, what is the worst thing about Ardra? The worst thing about Ardra is to over-focus on other people and not focus enough on itself, for example. That's one thing that Ardra does. Another really nasty thing about Ardra is that it can be too quick to point out other people's flaws. Oh, man, juggling. You guys are giving me so many different nakshatras. I'm having to switch from one mode of thinking to another mode of thinking because it's almost like I have to enter into the universe of these different placements. Anyway, let me give myself some time to think about Saturn and Ardra because, yeah. What about Saturn in the 6th, 5th, or 2nd house? Saturn is really scary in those houses. Saturn is scary in every house, but it becomes less scary if it is well placed. When Saturn is well placed, it will still intimidate you, but it'll make it easier for you to confront those significations. The worse placed Saturn is, the more those significations scare you. You know what I mean? The worse placed Saturn is, the more those significations scare you. If you have Saturn in the 5th house, you may be afraid of having children. You may be afraid of being a celebrity. You may be afraid of calling attention to yourself, etc. Do I also post on Instagram? I do have an Instagram. Where's my phone? My phone is far away. I do have an Instagram. I'm trying to post more often there. I think you should look for, what do I call myself? I forgot. But I'm going to find my Instagram link and I'm going to put it on my YouTube. Saturn in Purvashada. Let me see how quickly I can think of something. Purvashada is the most attractive nakshatra. Now, beauty and attraction are not the same thing. Beauty is physical. Attraction is something that is more internal. Somebody could be physically perfect looking, but they could have no personality. Somebody could be physically perfect looking, but they're technically not attractive because they're cold, they're not interesting, they're not fun. Purva Ashadas are intoxicatingly fun. They're fun. They walk into a room, the room wakes up with excitement, you know? And so if you have Saturn in Purvashada, what that could suggest is that you don't really have, you're not very attractive. Sorry, I'm sure that's not necessarily the case for you. I'm sure you're very attractive, but I'm just talking in general. Saturn Purvashada, because it takes away from your charisma. Purvashada is a very charismatic nakshatra. Purvashada is a very charismatic nakshatra, and they are intentionally charismatic. They know how charismatic they are. They know that they can excite a room. And so if you have Saturn there, it can really take away from that. It can take away from your charm. It can take away from your ability to seduce the opposite sex. It can take away from your ability to seduce the same sex, you know. And so there's that. Ooh, God. What about Saturn Kritika? I already did Saturn Kritika. Thank you for your $2 donation. I suppose now I ought to answer your question. So let me linger a little bit longer here. Saturn in Uttarashada in the 8th, second pada. So that's Saturn in Capricorn, which generally speaking suggests that it's well placed. If you have Saturn in Capricorn in the 8th house, it suggests that 8th house significations are a little bit scary to you, but you're not afraid of taking your time to slowly learn and slowly build an understanding of those significations. Like, for example, you're somebody who, let's talk about sex. You don't really feel very confident in your ability to seduce the opposite sex. You don't really feel very confident in your ability to please the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever the case may be. You don't really feel very confident in your ability to be sexual, but you're like, you know what? I'm going to make a project out of this. I'm going to read books about sex. I'm going to listen to podcasts about sex. And I'm going to slowly but surely learn how to do these sexual things. You know, you're very brave about that. Uttara Ashada is a nakshatra that is related to people who are very, very free. Uttarashada, Swati, these are some of the most free nakshatras, people who are always traveling, people who do not have an attachment to people or places or things. If you have Saturn in Uttarashada, it reduces those qualities. Instead of being somebody who has no attachments to other people, you're somebody who does have attachments to other people. You know, you're somebody who does want to be connected to others. Yes, you're somebody who does. And also, Uttarashada is another very charismatic nakshatra. Between Purva and Uttarashada, I don't even know which one is more charismatic. They're both very charismatic. They're both very, very charismatic. If you have Saturn in Uttarashada, it suggests that your charisma is reduced, but you decide to make a science out of it. So you might read a book like How to Win Friends and Influence People, things like that. Slowly, you make a science out of being charismatic. Slowly, you make a science out of being a fun and cool person. And over time, and it's easy for you to do that because your Saturn is well placed. So you're not intimidated by those significations. When your Saturn is badly placed, you're so afraid of humiliation. You're so afraid of embarrassment. You're so anxious about those things that you never even try. But when your Saturn is well placed, you're like, you breathe in, you breathe out. You're like, all right, this is an area that I'm not very experienced in, but I'm going to slowly learn. And so if you have Saturn in Uttarashada, you probably are somebody who tries to make a science, tries to make a project out of being charismatic, tries to make a science, tries to make a project out of being more adventurous, more free. And slowly over time, you arrive at that place. You know, you might be somebody who tries to study, like you might be very, very fascinated by studying people who have Uttarashada energy, free, dynamic energy like that. So, yeah. Shadabisha is not a Saturn nakshatra. It is within the Saturn sign. So, yeah. Ooh. If you have Saturn in Maga, the people who oppress you are probably your family. Your father probably oppresses you. Your family probably oppresses you. They probably make you feel like you can't be your own person. They probably enslave you. They probably make you feel like you're indebted to them. If you have Saturn in Maga can make a person very, very insecure because Maga is a placement that The confidence of Maga comes from a place. Where does it come from? How do I describe the place where the confidence comes from? Anyway, whatever. I can't think that deeply right now because there are too many questions. In any case, having Saturn in Maga can make a person debilitatingly insecure because you do not. The confidence of Leo is reduced. It is greatly, greatly reduced. Thank you. I actually am planning on doing a second beauty in astrology. I don't know if I want to do a video. I don't know what I want to do. But yeah, because I have been learning more things and I've been refining those techniques. Oh, so you have Saturn in Uttarashada and you have your ascendant in Uttarashada. Okay, that's great. What is my advice on weak Saturn in general? Oof. So many questions. What is my advice for weak Saturn in general? It depends on the sign, really. It depends on the sign. It depends on the nakshatra. If you're someone who has Saturn in Barney, for example, I'd say, listen, women may scare you, but talk to them. Yeah, you might embarrass yourself. Talk to them anyway. And so it really does depend on the placement. General advice for Saturn and for a badly placed Saturn, you have to study the energies that are said to be healing to Saturn. Kali, for example, goddess Kali is healing to Saturn. So contemplate her, study her. You'll figure many things out. Oh, okay, that's very interesting. Wait, are you saying that you have three grahas in Uttara Ashada? Sun, Saturn, and Rahu? In that case, the things that I said about you, they're not going to apply as well. They're not going to apply as much because if you have Sun in Uttara Ashada, what that suggests is that you are adventurous. What that suggests is that you are somebody who is less attached to people, and so you're probably someone who travels widely and broadly. You know, you're the kind of guy that if next week you have to travel to France, if a month from now you have to go to Japan, you would pack lightly and you just go. You know, you'd wander the streets. You're probably the kind of guy, I obviously don't know what other placements you got going on. You can easily make friends. You can make friends because you're the kind of guy, you're very, very chill. You're very, very chill. You're wandering the streets. You literally make friends like this. Right? And people are amazed by how easily you make friends. So yeah. Oof. When you talk about Saturn, are you referring to Saturnian signs or nakshatras? When I talk about Saturn, I'm talking about Saturn, the planets. But it just so happens that in my opinion, and in the opinion of many astrologers, Saturn nakshatras tend to represent a more raw version of Saturn, whereas Saturn signs tend to represent a more mature version of Saturn. So a lot of times when you read about descriptions of Saturn, the raw expression of that is going to be expressed through the nakshatras. And so you're not going to see as much of that in the signs because the signs represent a little bit more of an adult version that does not engage in as many of these same activities. Saturn in Ashwini, my friend Dr. J606, I actually did talk about Saturn in Ashwini early on in the stream, so you should probably go back and read about that. All right, let me read about the last Saturn name so we can end this stream. All right. The one who holds a thunderbolt goad, and the one with a body like a thunderbolt. I connected these two names owing, of course, to their similarity. The word Vajra can indeed be translated as thunderbolt, but it is also translated as diamond. To become a diamond pulled from the depths of the earth, or a lotus blossom from the swamp, to go along with the nakshatras related to Saturn, it is the ultimate goal for the native, if only we would submit to its harshness. All right, then. So there we go. Saturn is a diamond. Saturn is a diamond. Saturn refines you until you become a diamond. The process of refinement is very, very painful, but eventually you become a diamond. Oh, and by the way, Great Sage, thank you very much for your donation. I did not thank you, so thank you for that. Let me like this as well. I appreciate it. Oh yes, I did mention my reading services, right? My reading services are. Let me type it right here. So I finished with the mini readings. The mini reading season is over. The new season that is open is the full birth chart readings for $150. And if you are interested, please email me at this email. When is the full birth charts season going to end? I'm thinking maybe 2 weeks, because I want to end it before I post my new video that is coming. What else? Let me finish up by promoting something else. I shall promote my Patreon. My Patreon. What is my Patreon name? There you go. My Patreon's name is Darsu Xuxa, for those of you who can pronounce Portuguese. So please be a member. Of course, I have 2 membership things. I have the $10 a month thing, and then I have the $300 a month thing for those who want me as their own personal astrologer. If you have me as your personal astrologer, you can contact me anytime you like. And then every 2 months, I give you a report. You have access. I give you a report on like your own dashas, interacting with the transits. You get access to the Discord. What else you got? A bunch of other stuff as well. So yes, if I become your personal astrologer, you can text me or Discord me anybody's chart, the charts of your employees, the charts of your business partners, the charts of people who you're interested in being in a relationship with. And I will very quickly, we will have a conversation about that person's chart, or basically anything else, you know. But of course, it's a limited number because I cannot take too many, because it's an incredible amount of work. So yeah, oh, I see another donation. Let me thank you. One way of healing Saturn in MAGA, try to build your identity outside of your family, because your family is going to try to oppress you, or your ancestors may try to oppress you. Nakshatra animal painting really help in life? I don't know about that, although I think I heard Kara's channel talk about that one time. Thank you again for your donation. People like you more than you like them. Oh, look, you got Uttarashada Sun and you got Purvashada Moon. Look at you. I wonder what your ascendant must be. Okay, so if you have Uttarashada Sun in the 8th house, then you have Purvashada Moon in the 7th house. So you have a Gemini ascendant. And then if you have a Gemini ascendant and Mercury rules your ascendant, and Mercury is in the 7th house in Mula, I mean, I don't know your charts, Great Sage, but it sounds to me like the chart of a person who is very charismatic, very social, very charming, that yeah, it would make sense that people like you more than you like them. Please also make something about Kritika Nakshatra. Your last work about Kritika was a while ago. I just love your videos. Wish you would post more. Thank you very much for liking my videos. Unfortunately, I don't have anything planned for Kritika in the foreseeable future. I'm very, very sorry. I'm going to do this new video. Then I'm going to do a MAGA video. Now, what other video was I supposed to do? I think I'm going to do a Shadabisha video. Oh, no, I said I was going to do a Rohini video, wasn't I? Oh, so yeah, there's a lot. Hi, not sure if I can pronounce this, Eshuke. Thank you so much for your generous, very, very generous donation. Thanks. Your reply on Kali, Saturn, Uttarabhadra plus K2 at the fifth house. Since you said it's placement specific, please. You want me to describe Saturn in Uttarabhadra plus K2? If you have Saturn in Uttarabhadra conjunct K2, you're probably somebody who, especially when you're young, you are probably easily curse. You probably suffer from horrible nightmares because, like, you were oppressed, you were victimized by spiritual entities. You know, witches would easily curse you because there's something about you that's easily curseable. Spirits could easily possess you, or spirits could easily enter into your home. You're probably somebody who suffered from a lot of fear. I mean, I know that a lot of kids are afraid of insects, but you are probably really afraid of insects. You were probably just a really fearful person in general, you know? Yeah. Spiritual subjects were confusing to you, probably fascinating, but very, very confusing to you. If you have Saturn conjunct K2, Saturn would limit some of K2's qualities. Maybe you were disconnected from your ancestors. Maybe you don't speak your local language. Maybe you're somebody who does not identify very much with your own birth gender. Maybe because K2 relates to a primordial power. You know, maybe you're somebody who probably did not feel too confident about yourself because, yes, it could probably cause some degree of insecurity because K2, when it's very well placed, makes a person very confident about themselves because it's like they're saying to themselves, yes, I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know my talents. I know what I'm good at.